Baby found a German shepherd drowning in a river. What he did next left everyone crying. The story you're about to listen will break your heart and then put it back together. What this brave little boy did when he found a dying dog will make you believe in miracles again. Like, share, and let us know where you're watching from. A thin layer of mist hovered over the Schwarzwasser River as the first light of dawn broke through the trees. The air was cool, filled with the earthy scent of damp soil and pine. In these early hours, the small village of Eichenwald was still asleep, except for one little cottage at the edge of the forest, where a light flickered in the kitchen window. Inside, 5-year-old Tommy Wilson sat at the breakfast table, swinging his legs that were too short to reach the floor. His grandmother, Martha, stood by the stove, flipping pancakes that filled the kitchen with a sweet aroma. "Can we go to the river today, Nana?" Tommy asked, his voice small but hopeful. He clutched his worn teddy bear, Mr. Hugs, against his chest, his tiny fingers digging into the matted fur. Martha looked over her shoulder at her grandson. Those big round eyes hadn't sparkled for months, not since the accident that took his father and left Tommy without a word to say. The doctors called it selective mutism. Trauma had stolen his voice. This was the first time in weeks he'd asked to go anywhere. "Of course, my little sunshine," she said, placing a pancake shaped like a star on his plate. "After breakfast, we'll take a little adventure." Tommy didn't smile. He rarely did anymore, but he nodded and took a small bite of his pancake. An hour later, they walked hand in hand along the riverbank. The mist still lingered, dancing above the water's surface like ghostly fingers. Martha noticed how Tommy's eyes followed the currents, searching for something she couldn't see. "Stay where I can see you," she cautioned, as Tommy wandered a few steps ahead. She settled on a flat rock with her knitting, keeping a watchful eye on her grandson. Tommy crouched by the water's edge, Mr. Hugs tucked under his arm. He picked up small pebbles and dropped them into the water, watching the ripples spread in perfect circles. The simple pleasure seemed to calm him. But something felt wrong today. Martha couldn't place it. Perhaps it was the unusual stillness of the forest, or the distant rumble of thunder promising a storm. The river seemed higher than normal, the current stronger. "Tommy, don't go too close to the water, dear," she called. Tommy nodded but didn't look back. His attention was fixed on something in the distance, a fallen branch perhaps, or a colorful stone. The air grew heavy with electricity. Birds that had been singing fell silent. Martha's fingers stilled on her knitting needles as an inexplicable unease washed over her. "Tommy, I think we should head back soon," she said, rising from her seat. "There's a storm coming." But Tommy wasn't listening. His gaze was locked on Mr. Hugs, who had somehow slipped from under his arm and was now precariously balanced on a rock at the river's edge. Time slowed as Martha watched the teddy bear teeter on the rock. A gust of wind, just the slightest breath, was all it took. Mr. Hugs toppled into the swirling current. "No!" Martha cried. But it was too late. Tommy's face crumpled in silent distress. Without hesitation, he dropped to his hands and knees and began crawling toward the edge, reaching desperately for his only friend as the current carried Mr. Hugs away. "Tommy, stop!" Martha shouted, her heart in her throat as she scrambled to reach him. The ground beneath Tommy's small hands was slick with morning dew. As he stretched his arm out toward the floating teddy, his foot slipped on the muddy bank. Martha lunged forward, but she was too far away. Tommy teetered on the edge, his eyes wide with fear. Mr. Hugs was floating away, becoming smaller with each passing second. In that moment of indecision, Tommy's world tilted. Martha's scream pierced the morning air as Tommy's foot slid further into the mud. He wasn't falling in, not yet, but he was dangerously close, his small body half on, half off the riverbank. "Don't move, Tommy! Don't move!" Martha called, her voice shaking as she carefully made her way toward him. That's when they both heard it. A splash. Different from the gentle lapping of the river against the shore. Something large had disturbed the water downstream. Tommy froze, his eyes drawn to the disturbance. About 20 feet away, something dark broke the surface of the water. At first, Martha thought it was a log, or perhaps a large fish. But then she saw it. A snout, then ears, then desperate eyes. A dog, a German shepherd, was thrashing in the current, its head barely above water. It let out a strangled yelp that sent chills down Martha's spine. "Oh my God," she whispered, momentarily forgetting Tommy's precarious position. The dog's eyes, wild with fear, locked with Tommy's. Something passed between them, a silent understanding that Martha couldn't comprehend. Tommy's body tensed. For the first time in months, Martha saw a flicker of something other than sadness in her grandson's eyes. Determination. The German shepherd's head disappeared beneath the surface, then bobbed up again. Its struggles were weakening. Whatever force had brought it to the river was winning the battle. Tommy's attention shifted completely from his lost teddy bear to the drowning dog. Without warning, he began crawling, not back toward safety, but along the river's edge, toward the struggling animal. "Tommy, no!" Martha screamed, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Come back!" But Tommy didn't listen. Something stronger than fear propelled him forward. His little hands and knees moved with purpose, leaving tiny imprints in the mud as he made his way closer to the drowning dog. Martha ran along the riverbank, her knitting forgotten, her eyes never leaving her grandson's small form. The storm clouds gathered overhead, casting an ominous shadow over the river. The first drops of rain began to fall, pattering against the leaves and creating tiny dimples in the water's surface. The dog was tiring quickly. Each time it resurfaced, its efforts were weaker. Tommy reached a point in the riverbank where he was directly across from the struggling animal. The dog was only a few feet from the edge now, caught in an eddy that swirled mercilessly. Martha was just steps behind Tommy when he did something that stopped her heart. He laid flat on his stomach and extended his arm over the water, reaching toward the dog. "Tommy!" she screamed, diving forward to grab his legs. But it was too late. The dog's thrashing had brought it within arm's reach of the bank. As Martha watched in horror, Tommy's small hand made contact with something. The dog's collar, barely visible beneath the fur, slick with river water. His tiny fingers wrapped around the leather strip. For one terrifying moment, it seemed as if the dog's weight would pull Tommy into the river. Martha lunged forward, grabbing her grandson's legs just as the momentum threatened to drag him under. The German shepherd's eyes, full of fear and exhaustion, met Tommy's again. Something passed between them, an unspoken connection that transcended words. The dog stopped thrashing, as if it understood that this small human was trying to help. Thunder cracked overhead, and the rain began to fall in earnest. Martha held onto Tommy's legs with all her strength, her entire body trembling with fear and exertion. "Hold on, Tommy," she pleaded. "Please hold on." Tommy's grip on the collar remained firm. His face showed no fear, only fierce concentration. The dog paddled weakly, moving closer to the bank, guided by Tommy's grip. Martha could see now that the animal was injured. Dark streaks that might have been blood mixed with the river water around its body. Yet, despite its wounds, the German shepherd seemed to be fighting not just for its own life, but for Tommy's too, careful not to pull the boy in as it struggled toward the shore. The current shifted, pushing the dog closer to the bank. Tommy's grip tightened. With strength that seemed impossible for his small frame, he began to pull. Martha adjusted her position, maintaining her hold on Tommy while reaching her other hand toward the dog. "Come on," she urged. "Come on, you can make it." The German shepherd's paws scraped against the riverbed as it found footing in the shallows. With one final effort, it lunged toward the bank. Tommy pulled at the same moment, and suddenly the dog's front paws were on solid ground. Martha let go of Tommy's legs and grabbed the dog's collar alongside her grandson. Together, they pulled the exhausted animal completely out of the water. The German shepherd collapsed on the muddy bank, its sides heaving, water streaming from its coat. Tommy immediately crawled to the dog's head, his small hands cradling its muzzle with tender care. Martha fell to her knees beside them, tears mixing with raindrops on her face. "Oh, Tommy," she whispered, "what were you thinking? You could have—" Her words died in her throat as she saw her grandson's face. For the first time since the accident, Tommy's eyes were alive with emotion. His hands moved gently over the dog's wet fur, checking for injuries with the intuitive care of someone much older. The German shepherd's eyes remained fixed on Tommy, full of gratitude and something deeper, a recognition. Its tail moved weakly against the mud, a small thump of acknowledgement. Martha looked more closely at the animal. It was thin, too thin, with ribs visible beneath its wet coat. There were marks around its neck where the collar had rubbed the fur away, suggesting it had been chained for a long time. And the injuries she had glimpsed in the water were indeed real, long cuts on its legs and side that looked deliberate rather than accidental. "Who did this to you?" she whispered, anger rising in her chest. The dog whimpered softly, pressing its nose against Tommy's small hand. Tommy's fingers worked methodically, untangling burrs and twigs from the wet fur, his focus absolute. Martha realized they couldn't stay by the river. The rain was coming down harder now, and both Tommy and the dog were soaked and shivering. "We need to get you both home," she said, touching Tommy's shoulder. "Can you help me with the dog? Do you think it can walk?" Tommy looked up at his grandmother, his eyes asking the question his voice couldn't. "Yes," Martha said, understanding immediately. "The dog is coming with us. We'll take care of it." Relief washed over Tommy's face. He turned back to the German Shepherd and placed his small hand on its shoulder, a gentle encouragement. As if understanding, the dog struggled to its feet. It swayed slightly, clearly weak from its ordeal, but remained standing. Water dripped from its coat, washing away some of the mud to reveal a beautiful black and tan coloring beneath. "Good dog," Martha said softly. "Good, brave dog." They made their way slowly along the riverbank toward home, the rain pelting down around them. Tommy walked beside the German Shepherd, one hand resting lightly on its back for support. The dog matched its pace to the boys, stopping when he stopped, moving when he moved. Martha watched them with wonder. There was something almost supernatural about the connection between her grandson and this animal, as if they recognized in each other a shared pain, a shared silence. As they walked, she couldn't help but notice how Tommy's posture had changed. The perpetual slump of his shoulders was gone, replaced by a purposeful straightness. His eyes, instead of being fixed on the ground, as they had been for months, darted constantly to the dog beside him, checking, caring. The German Shepherd, despite its obvious pain and exhaustion, seemed equally attentive to Tommy. When the boy stumbled on a rock, the dog pressed closer, steadying him with its body. When Tommy paused to catch his breath, the dog stopped too, patient and watchful. By the time they reached the cottage, all three were soaked to the skin. Thunder rumbled overhead as Martha ushered boy and dog through the door into the warmth of the kitchen. "Wait here," she instructed, hurrying to fetch towels. When she returned, she found Tommy sitting on the floor beside the German Shepherd, his small hand resting on the dog's head. The animal's eyes were closed, its breathing steadier now. Tommy's face showed absolute concentration as he gently studied every inch of the dog's injured body. Martha knelt beside them and began carefully drying the dog with a towel. The German Shepherd opened its eyes but didn't move, allowing her to tend to it. "You're safe now," she told the dog softly. "Both of you are safe." Outside, the storm gathered strength, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling through the trees. But inside the small cottage, a different kind of storm was breaking. The long winter of Tommy's silence was beginning to thaw in the presence of this unexpected survivor. Martha didn't yet know where this German Shepherd had come from or who had heard it. She didn't know how it had ended up fighting for its life in the river or why it had appeared at the exact moment when Tommy was reaching for his lost teddy bear. But as she watched her grandson's careful ministrations, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Something extraordinary had happened by the river today. A little boy who had lost his voice had found his purpose. A dog who had lost its home had found a savior. And somehow, in the middle of a gathering storm, two broken souls had reached out across the darkness and found each other. The true magnitude of what had occurred would only become clear in the days to come. But in that moment, as thunder cracked overhead and rain drummed against the roof, Martha Wilson knew with absolute certainty that their lives had been forever changed by what had happened at the edge of the Schwarzwasser River. Martha wrapped another dry towel around Tommy's shoulders, but his attention remained fixed on the German Shepherd. The dog's breathing had steadied, but Martha could see that its injuries needed proper care. Long cuts ran along its side, and one of its paws was swollen. "We need to call Dr. Peterson," she said, reaching for the phone. "He takes care of the Miller's farm animals. He'll know what to do." Tommy didn't acknowledge her words. He sat cross-legged on the floor, one hand resting on the dog's neck, his eyes never leaving its face. There was a focus to him that Martha hadn't seen since before the accident. While she spoke quietly to the veterinarian, explaining their situation, Martha watched her grandson. Tommy's fingers moved gently through the dog's fur, carefully avoiding the cuts and bruises. The German Shepherd's eyes remained locked on Tommy, following his every movement with an intensity that seemed almost human. "He'll be here in 20 minutes, Martha said, hanging up the phone. "Let's see if we can make our friend more comfortable." She filled a bowl with clean water and placed it near the dog's head. The German shepherd sniffed at it, but made no move to drink. "Maybe it's too weak," Martha murmured. To her surprise, Tommy cupped his hands in the water and brought them to the dog's mouth. The German shepherd lapped weakly at the water pooled in Tommy's small palms, its eyes never leaving the boy's face. Martha felt a lump form in her throat. She turned away, busying herself with preparing a makeshift bed from old blankets, not wanting Tommy to see the tears welling in her eyes. By the time Dr. Peterson arrived, the rain had intensified into a full storm. The veterinarian stamped his feet on the welcome mat, shaking water from his coat as Martha ushered him inside. "Where's the patient?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. Martha led him to the kitchen where Tommy sat in exactly the same position, still watching over the German shepherd. "Hello, young man," Dr. Peterson said, setting his bag down. Tommy didn't look up or acknowledge the greeting. His focus remained entirely on the dog. "He doesn't speak," Martha explained quietly. "Not since his father." Dr. Peterson nodded, understanding. "That's all right. Sometimes the best healers are the quiet ones." He knelt beside the German shepherd, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Now, let's see what we have here." The dog growled softly as the veterinarian reached toward it. Tommy immediately placed his hand on the dog's head, a gentle touch that seemed to calm the animal instantly. "Well, I'll be," Dr. Peterson murmured. "Seems you've got a way with animals, young man." He examined the German shepherd carefully, his expression growing more troubled as he discovered each injury. "These aren't accidental," he said finally, looking up at Martha. "Someone did this to her." "Her?" Martha asked. "Yes, she's a female. Probably about 2 years old, I'd guess." He gently probed the dog's ribs. "She's malnourished, has several lacerations that look deliberate, and there's evidence of prolonged restraint around her neck and paws." His voice hardened. "Someone kept her chained up and treated her very badly." Tommy's hand tightened ever so slightly in the dog's fur. The German shepherd whimpered and pressed closer to him. "Can you help her?" Martha asked. Dr. Peterson nodded. "I can clean and stitch these wounds, give her antibiotics and pain relief, but she's going to need time and care to recover, both physically and mentally." He looked at Tommy. "Though it seems she's already found the best medicine." For the next hour, Dr. Peterson worked on the German shepherd's injuries. Tommy remained by her side throughout, holding her head in his lap as the veterinarian cleaned, stitched, and bandaged. Not once did the dog attempt to bite or pull away. She seemed to understand that they were trying to help her. "You've got a remarkably calm patient," Dr. Peterson commented as he finished wrapping a bandage around the dog's paw. "Most dogs I treat need to be sedated for this kind of work." Martha watched in amazement. "It's Tommy. She trusts him completely." "I've never seen anything quite like it," the veterinarian admitted. "It's as if they've known each other for years." As Dr. Peterson packed up his supplies, he handed Martha several bottles of medication. "These are antibiotics, twice a day with food. These are for pain. Every 8 hours for the next 3 days, then as needed." He scratched his head. "I should report this to Sheriff Davis. Animal cruelty is a crime, and whoever did this is dangerous." Martha nodded in agreement. "Do you have any idea where she might have come from?" "Well, there aren't many German shepherds in the area. The only one I know of belongs to that new fellow who moved into the old Miller property last month." He frowned. "Can't recall his name, but folks say he keeps to himself. Not very friendly." Thunder crashed overhead, making them all jump. The German shepherd trembled slightly, and Tommy stroked her head, soothing her. "I'd better get going before this storm gets worse," Dr. Peterson said, moving toward the door. "Call me if her condition changes. I'll check back tomorrow." After the veterinarian left, Martha prepared a simple dinner of soup and sandwiches. Tommy refused to leave the dog's side, so Martha brought his food to him on the floor. She watched as her grandson carefully tore his sandwich into tiny pieces and offered them to the German shepherd before eating anything himself. The dog accepted the offerings delicately, taking the food from Tommy's fingers with gentle care. There was something about the way she watched the boy, an awareness, a protectiveness, that went beyond normal animal behavior. "She needs a name," Martha said, sitting beside them. "We can't just keep calling her the dog." Tommy looked up, his eyes thoughtful. He glanced toward the window where lightning flashed, illuminating the kitchen for a brief moment. "Star?" Martha suggested, following his gaze to the storm outside. Because she appeared when you needed her most, like a guiding star? Tommy considered this, then shook his head. He pointed to the window again, more insistently. Storm, Martha tried. Again Tommy shook his head. He made a zigzag motion with his finger. Lightning, Martha guessed. You want to call her Lightning? A small nod, the first sign of approval. Martha smiled, her heart swelling with emotion at this tiny breakthrough. Lightning it is, then, she said softly. That night, Tommy refused to sleep in his bed. Martha brought blankets to the kitchen floor, creating a comfortable pallet beside Lightning. She expected an argument with herself about proper sleeping arrangements, but looking at her grandson curled up next to the dog, his small hand resting protectively on her bandaged side, Martha couldn't bring herself to separate them. Just for tonight, she whispered, kissing Tommy's forehead before retreating to her own room. She woke at dawn to find Tommy's bed empty. Panic seized her until she remembered the events of the previous day. She hurried to the kitchen, expecting to find them both still asleep on the floor. Instead, Tommy was sitting at the table, Lightning at his feet. The dog's eyes followed Martha as she entered, alert but no longer wary. Good morning, Martha said, surprised to see them both awake. How is our patient today? Tommy didn't answer, of course, but his eyes held a clarity that had been missing for months. He pointed to Lightning's water bowl, which was empty. She's thirsty? Martha asked, filling the bowl. That's a good sign. It means she's feeling better. As the morning progressed, Martha was amazed at the change in both Tommy and Lightning. The dog seemed stronger, moving around the kitchen with more ease despite her bandages. And Tommy, her silent, withdrawn Tommy, appeared almost animated as he attended to Lightning's needs. Around noon, a heavy knock on the door startled them. Lightning immediately positioned herself in front of Tommy, her posture alert, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Martha opened the door to find Sheriff Davis on her porch, his expression grim beneath his rain-spattered hat. Mrs. Wilson, he greeted her, Dr. Peterson called about a dog you found. Said there might be an animal cruelty case. Yes, please come in, Martha stepped aside. We found her in the river yesterday. She was drowning. Sheriff Davis followed Martha into the kitchen, where his eyes immediately fell on Tommy and Lightning. The dog's growl deepened, her body tense. Well now, the sheriff said, keeping his distance, that's certainly a German shepherd. Tommy's arm went around Lightning's neck, a protective gesture that didn't escape the sheriff's notice. Your grandson's gotten attached, he observed. She saved him, Martha explained. He was trying to reach a toy that fell in the river. If Lightning hadn't appeared when she did, drawing his attention. She couldn't finish the sentence, the possibility too terrible to voice. Sheriff Davis nodded thoughtfully. Dr. Peterson mentioned the dog's injuries. Said they looked deliberate. They were, Martha confirmed, anger coloring her voice. Someone hurt her badly, then threw her in the river to drown. Who would do such a thing? The sheriff removed his hat, turning it in his hands. There's been a report of a missing German shepherd from the old Miller property. Fellow named Rankin moved in last month. Says his dog ran off 2 days ago. Martha felt her blood run cold. And you think Lightning belongs to him? Lightning? The sheriff raised an eyebrow. That's what Tommy named her, Martha explained. She lowered her voice. Sheriff, you can't possibly think of returning her to someone who treated her like this. Sheriff Davis sighed. I understand your concern, Mrs. Wilson, but I can't accuse a man of animal cruelty without evidence. For all we know, someone else hurt the dog before Rankin reported her missing. Look at her, Martha insisted. The marks around her neck from being chained, the deliberate cuts. Dr. Peterson said she's been malnourished for some time. The sheriff glanced at Lightning, who remained positioned protectively in front of Tommy. I admit it doesn't look good, but I need to investigate properly before making accusations. Are you going to take her away? Martha asked, her heart sinking. Sheriff Davis looked at Tommy, noting the boy's arms still wrapped around Lightning's neck, the dog's vigilant posture. Not today, he said finally. She's clearly in no condition to be moved, and your grandson... He trailed off, his expression softening. I heard about what happened to your son-in-law. I'm truly sorry. Martha nodded, not trusting herself to speak. I'll talk to this Rankin fellow, the sheriff continued. Check his property, his story. In the meantime, you keep caring for the dog. I'll be back once I know more. After the sheriff left, Martha sank into a chair, her thoughts turbulent. The possibility of Lightning being taken away, especially to someone who had hurt her, was unbearable. Not just for the dog's sake, but for Tommy's. In just one day, Lightning had accomplished what months of therapy couldn't. She had brought a spark back to Tommy's eyes. The sound of the back door opening jolted Martha from her thoughts. She turned to see Tommy leading Lightning outside into the yard, his movements careful and attentive to the dog's injuries. Through the window, Martha watched as Tommy settled on the back step, Lightning beside him. The rain had stopped, leaving the world fresh and glistening. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting dappled patterns across the yard. Tommy's hand rested on Lightning's head, his fingers absently stroking her ears. The dog leaned against him, her body relaxed for the first time since they had pulled her from the river. Martha was about to turn away when she saw Tommy's lips move. She froze, hardly daring to breathe. Was he speaking? After months of silence, was he actually forming words? She couldn't hear what he said, if he said anything at all. But Lightning's ears perked up, and her tail thumped against the wooden step. Martha's heart raced as she quietly approached the back door, straining to hear. Tommy was looking out across the yard, his profile solemn as his fingers continued their gentle rhythm in Lightning's fur. Then, so softly that Martha almost missed it, came a whisper. "Friend?" A single word, barely audible, but it shattered the months of silence like a thunderclap. Martha's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Lightning turned her head to look up at Tommy, her dark eyes full of understanding. She nudged his arm with her nose, a gentle acknowledgement. Martha retreated silently to the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. One word. After all this time, one precious word. And it had taken a half-drowned, abused dog to unlock it. She was still wiping her eyes when the phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson, calling to check on Lightning's condition. "She's doing remarkably well," Martha told him, her voice thick with emotion. "And Tommy?" Tommy spoke. Just one word, but he spoke. "That's wonderful news," the veterinarian said warmly. "What did he say?" "Friend," Martha replied. "He called Lightning his friend." There was a moment of silence on the line. "Martha," Dr. Peterson said finally, "I've been thinking about those injuries. There was something familiar about the pattern of cuts." Martha tensed. "What do you mean?" "I've seen similar wounds on livestock that got caught in barbed wire, but Lightning's injuries were too precise, too evenly spaced to be accidental." He paused. "I think someone tied her up with barbed wire before throwing her in the river." Martha felt sick. Who would do such a thing? "I don't know," Dr. Peterson admitted, "but I've heard stories about that Rankin fellow. He doesn't have the best reputation, keeps to himself, but some of the farmers have mentioned strange noises coming from his property at night. Animal sounds, distressed ones. Sheriff Davis mentioned him too, said Rankin reported a missing German shepherd." Dr. Peterson's voice hardened. "If Lightning is his dog, I'll testify that she shows signs of prolonged abuse. No court would return her to him." "But what if he comes looking for her?" Martha asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Let's hope the sheriff's investigation turns up something concrete," Dr. Peterson said. "In the meantime, keep your doors locked and call me if anything changes, with Lightning or Tommy." After hanging up, Martha went to check on Tommy and Lightning. They were still sitting on the back step, Tommy's arm now around the dog's neck, his face pressed against her fur. Martha hesitated, then quietly joined them, sitting on Tommy's other side. "She's a good friend, isn't she?" she said softly. Tommy nodded, his eyes never leaving Lightning. "Friends protect each other," Martha continued, choosing her words carefully. "Like Lightning protected you at the river, and now you're protecting her by taking care of her injuries." Tommy turned to look at his grandmother, his expression serious. Something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. "If anyone tries to hurt Lightning again," Martha said, "we won't let them. She's part of our family now." Tommy's eyes widened slightly. Then, to Martha's amazement, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing to it she'd seen in months. Lightning shifted position, laying her head across Tommy's lap. Her eyes drifted closed as the late afternoon sun warmed them all. They stayed like that until dusk. A small, fragile family forged by river water and shared pain. Martha knew that challenges lay ahead. Sheriff Davis's investigation, the mysterious Rankin, and Lightning's continued recovery. But in that moment, watching her grandson find comfort in this unexpected friendship, she felt a hope she'd almost forgotten. The journey ahead would not be easy, but they had already survived the impossible. Together, they would face whatever came next. Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything? What would you do to protect someone who saved you? The next morning brought sunshine and birdsong after the storm. Martha woke to find Tommy's bed empty again. This time, she didn't panic, but smiled to herself as she made her way to the kitchen, expecting to find him with Lightning. The kitchen was empty. "Tommy!" she called, a flutter of worry rising in her chest. "Tommy, where are you?" No answer came. Martha checked the living room, the bathroom, even looked under Tommy's bed. Her heart began to race. "Tommy!" she called more urgently, hurrying toward the back door. She flung it open and stopped short. There, in the dewy grass of the backyard, sat Tommy with Lightning beside him. The dog's head rested on Tommy's lap, her eyes closed in contentment despite her bandages. Tommy's fingers worked methodically through her fur, untangling small knots with patient care. Martha released the breath she'd been holding. "You scared me, Sunshine," she said, stepping onto the porch. "Next time, leave me a note or wake me up before you go outside, okay?" Tommy looked up, his expression serious. Then, to Martha's astonishment, he nodded, a deliberate, conscious response to her request. "Thank you," she said, her voice catching slightly. Another step forward, another tiny crack in the wall of silence that had surrounded her grandson for so long. She joined them on the grass, noting how Lightning's eyes opened to track her movement, but without the wariness of yesterday. The dog seemed to have accepted Martha as part of her new pack. "How's our patient this morning?" Martha asked, carefully examining the bandages. They were still clean and dry, a good sign. Tommy patted Lightning's side gently. The dog thumped her tail against the grass in response. "She seems stronger today," Martha observed. "Dr. Peterson's medicine must be working." Tommy's hand moved to Lightning's head, stroking between her ears with a tenderness that brought tears to Martha's eyes. There was something in his touch, a connection, a silent communication that transcended words. Martha was about to suggest breakfast when Lightning's head suddenly jerked up, her ears alert, body tensing. A low growl rumbled in her throat as she stared toward the front of the house. "What is it, girl?" Martha asked, rising to her feet. The sound of a car engine grew louder, then stopped. Car doors slammed. Tommy's arm went around Lightning's neck, holding her close as her growl deepened. Martha moved toward the side of the house to see who had arrived. She recognized Sheriff Davis's patrol car, but there was another vehicle as well, a battered pickup truck she didn't recognize. "Stay here with Lightning," she told Tommy firmly. "I'll handle this." She walked around to the front yard just as Sheriff Davis approached the porch, accompanied by a tall, thin man with a sour expression. The stranger's cold eyes swept over Martha's cottage with undisguised contempt. "Mrs. Wilson," the sheriff greeted her, "this is Mr. Rankin. He believes the dog you found might be his." Rankin cut in before Martha could respond. "German Shepherd, female, went missing 3 days ago. That's my property, and I want it back." The way he said property sent chills down Martha's spine. She straightened her back, meeting his gaze steadily. "The dog we found was severely injured," she said. "Dr. Peterson treated her yesterday. He believes someone deliberately hurt her before throwing her in the river to drown." A flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Rankin's face before his expression hardened again. "Lot of strays around here get into fights, probably tangled with some wild animal before falling in the river. My dog, my business." Sheriff Davis cleared his throat. "Mr. Rankin has provided proof of ownership, vaccination records, purchase receipt." "May I see them?" Martha asked, not bothering to hide her skepticism. The sheriff handed her a folder containing several documents. Martha scanned them quickly. They appeared legitimate on first glance. Vaccination certificates, a bill of sale for a female German Shepherd named Rex from a breeder 2 years ago. "Rex?" Martha questioned, raising an eyebrow. "That's a male name." Rankin shrugged. "Didn't care what it was called. It's a guard dog, not a pet." Martha felt her dislike solidify into something harder. "Well, Rex is currently recovering from significant injuries. Dr. Peterson has prescribed bed rest and antibiotics. She can't be moved yet." "That's not your decision to make," Rankin snapped. "Where is it?" Before Martha could answer, a sound from the side of the house drew everyone's attention. Tommy stood there, one hand buried in Lightning's fur. The dog's posture was alert but controlled, her eyes fixed on Rankin with unmistakable fear. The change in Lightning was immediate and dramatic. Her ears flattened against her head. Her body trembled visibly, and she pressed herself against Tommy's legs as if trying to disappear. "That's my dog," Rankin said, starting forward. Sheriff Davis put a restraining hand on his arm. "Easy now." Tommy's face had gone pale, his eyes wide with distress as he sensed Lightning's fear. The dog whimpered softly, shrinking further behind the boy. "Look at her," Martha said quietly to the sheriff. "Does that look like a dog happy to see her owner?" Sheriff Davis frowned, clearly troubled by Lightning's reaction. "Mr. Rankin, perhaps we should discuss this further before—" "Nothing to discuss," Rankin cut in. "That's my property, and I'm taking it now." He shook off the sheriff's hand and strode toward Tommy and Lightning. Lightning's whimper transformed into a growl, deep and warning. She moved in front of Tommy, her body still shaking, but her stance protective now rather than fearful. "Stay back," Sheriff Davis ordered, moving quickly to intercept Rankin. "That dog is clearly distressed, and I won't have anyone getting hurt on my watch." "It's my dog," Rankin repeated, his voice rising. "You said so yourself after seeing the papers." "Papers can be faked," Martha interjected, "and even if they are legitimate, no court would return an animal to someone who abused it." Rankin's face darkened. "You accusing me of something, lady?" "I'm stating a fact," Martha replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "That dog was tortured, tied with barbed wire, starved, then thrown in the river to drown. Dr. Peterson has documented every injury." "You can't prove I did any of that," Rankin sneered. "Perhaps not yet," Sheriff Davis said thoughtfully. "But your reaction, and the dog's, gives me pause." He turned to Martha. "I think it's best if the dog stays here for now, at least until Dr. Peterson confirms she's well enough to be moved." "This is bullshit," Rankin spat. "You can't keep my property based on some old woman's feelings and a mute kid's attachment to a stray." Tommy flinched at the cruel words. Lightning's growl deepened, her teeth now visible in a clear warning. Sheriff Davis's expression hardened. "That's enough, Rankin. The dog stays here pending investigation. You're welcome to file a formal complaint at my office, but right now, I'm asking you to leave these people's property." For a moment, it seemed like Rankin might argue further. His eyes darted from the sheriff to Martha, then to Tommy and Lightning. Finally, he turned away with a disgusted sound. "This isn't over," he said over his shoulder as he stalked back to his truck. "I'll be back with court papers. That dog is mine." They watched in silence as Rankin drove away, gravel spinning from his tires. Sheriff Davis sighed heavily. "I apologize for that, Mrs. Wilson. I had to follow procedure and inform him, but I didn't expect him to show up here unannounced." "What happens now?" Martha asked. "I'll speak with Dr. Peterson, get his official statement about the dog's injuries. And I think I'll have a look around Rankin's property." His reaction was concerning. He glanced at Tommy and Lightning, who remained frozen in place. "In the meantime, I suggest you keep the dog inside, out of sight, and call me immediately if Rankin shows up again." After the sheriff left, Martha crouched down beside Tommy and Lightning. The dog was still trembling, her eyes darting nervously toward the direction Rankin had gone. "It's okay now," Martha said softly, reaching out to stroke Lightning's head. "He's gone. You're safe here." Tommy's arm tightened around Lightning's neck. His face held an expression Martha had never seen before, a fierce protectiveness that transformed his childish features into something older, determined. "Let's go inside," she suggested gently. "I'll make breakfast, and we can give Lightning her medicine." Throughout the day, Lightning remained unusually subdued. She followed Tommy everywhere, staying so close that he sometimes tripped over her. Each time a car passed on the distant road, her ears would prick up, and she would whine anxiously until the sound faded. Tommy seemed to understand her fear. He spoke no more words, but his hands were constantly reassuring. A touch on her head, a gentle scratch behind her ears, a comforting pat on her side. He shared his lunch with her, offering each bite to Lightning before taking one himself. Martha watched them, her heart heavy with worry. She had no doubt now that Rankin was responsible for Lightning's injuries. The dog's terror at his approach had been unmistakable. But the legal paperwork complicated matters. If Rankin returned with a court order, they might be forced to hand Lightning over. The thought was unbearable, not just for Lightning's sake, but for Tommy's as well. In just 2 days, the dog had accomplished what months of therapy couldn't. She had begun to bring Tommy back from the dark place he'd retreated to after his father's death. By evening, Martha had made up her mind. If necessary, she would fight Rankin with everything she had. She would call lawyers, animal protection agencies, whoever it took to keep Lightning safe. She was washing the dinner dishes when the phone rang. It was Dr. Peterson. "I've spoken with Sheriff Davis," he said without preamble. "He told me about Rankin showing up at your place this morning." "It was awful," Martha replied, lowering her voice so Tommy wouldn't hear from where he sat with Lightning in the living room. "That man is cruel, Doctor. You should have seen how Lightning reacted to him. Pure terror." "I believe it," Dr. Peterson said grimly. "I've filed an official veterinary report documenting the abuse, and I've reached out to colleagues in animal welfare. No judge will return her to Rankin after seeing my evidence." Martha felt a wave of relief. "Thank you. You don't know what that means to us." "There's something else," the veterinarian continued, his voice hesitant. "When I was examining Lightning yesterday, I noticed, well, I didn't want to say anything until I was sure." "What is it?" Martha asked, dread pooling in her stomach. Her belly seemed fuller than it should be, given her malnourished state. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but after reviewing my notes," he paused. "Martha, I believe Lightning might be pregnant." Martha nearly dropped the phone. "Pregnant? But she's so thin, so injured." "Yes, which makes her survival even more remarkable. I'd need to perform an ultrasound to confirm, but the signs are there. Slightly swollen teats, distended abdomen despite malnutrition. How far along would she be? Hard to say without proper examination. Maybe 5 or 6 weeks. If I'm right, she could deliver in a month or so." Martha's mind raced. A pregnant dog added new complications, more responsibility, more care needed. But it also strengthened their case against Rankin. No court would separate an expectant mother from a loving home. "I'd like to bring portable equipment tomorrow to check," Dr. Peterson continued. "If she is pregnant, we'll need to adjust her care regimen." After hanging up, Martha stood in the kitchen, absorbing this new information. Lightning, pregnant, the miracle of new life, against all odds. Yet another layer to this extraordinary story that had begun with a teddy bear falling into a river. She walked into the living room where Tommy sat on the floor beside Lightning, a picture book open on his lap. To Martha's astonishment, he appeared to be reading to the dog, his finger tracing along the words even though no sound came from his lips. Lightning watched him with rapt attention, her head resting on his knee, her earlier anxiety seemingly forgotten in his presence. "Tommy," Martha said softly, "Dr. Peterson thinks Lightning might be going to have puppies." Tommy looked up, his eyes widening with surprise. His gaze dropped to Lightning's belly, then back to his grandmother's face, a question in his expression. "He's coming tomorrow to check," Martha explained, sitting beside them. "If he's right, we'll need to take extra special care of her." Tommy's hand moved to Lightning's side, resting gently on her flank. The dog sighed contentedly, her eyes drifting closed. "She chose you, Tommy," Martha whispered. "Out of everyone in the world, she chose you to trust. And now she might give us the gift of new life." She stroked Lightning's head. "What an amazing girl you are." That night, Martha again allowed Tommy to sleep on the floor beside Lightning. She brought extra blankets, creating a cozy nest for them both. As she tucked the blanket around her grandson, she noticed something clutched in his hand, a small piece of paper. "What's that, sunshine?" she asked. Tommy hesitated, then slowly uncurled his fingers. It was a photograph, creased and worn from being handled often. Martha recognized it immediately. Tommy and his father, taken the summer before the accident. They were standing by this very river, fishing rods in hand, identical smiles on their faces. Martha's breath caught in her throat. Tommy hadn't looked at this photo since the funeral. He'd refused to have any pictures of his father visible in the house, turning them face down or hiding them in drawers. "Oh, Tommy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Tommy looked at the photograph for a long moment, then deliberately placed it on the floor where Lightning could see it. The dog sniffed at the image, then licked Tommy's hand. Martha felt tears spill down her cheeks. This small gesture held such meaning. Tommy was beginning to face his grief, to acknowledge the father he'd lost, and Lightning was helping him do it. She kissed her grandson's forehead and whispered goodnight, leaving the two of them curled together on their blanket nest, the photograph between them like a talisman. In her own room, Martha sat by the window, looking out at the night sky. Stars glittered above the river where, just 2 days ago, a series of unlikely events had brought a drowning dog into their lives and changed everything. What had led Lightning to that exact spot at that exact moment? What force had guided Tommy to reach for her instead of his beloved teddy bear? It seemed too perfect, too precisely timed to be mere coincidence. Martha wasn't a particularly religious woman, but in that moment she felt a sense of something greater at work, a cosmic kindness that had recognized two broken souls and brought them together to heal. The next morning, Martha woke to find her house transformed. Tommy had risen early and, for the first time in months, had shown initiative without being prompted. He had filled Lightning's water bowl, organized her medications on the kitchen counter, and even attempted to make breakfast, though the scattered cereal and spilled milk suggested he still needed practice. Most remarkably, he had retrieved more photographs from the drawers where they had been hidden. They now stood on the living room mantel, Tommy as a baby in his father's arms, his parents' wedding day, the family picnic at the lake 3 summers ago. Life before the darkness, displayed again without shame or pain. Lightning sat beside him, watching his every move with devoted attention. Her injuries already looked better, the swelling reduced, some of the smaller cuts beginning to heal. "Good morning," Martha said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Tommy turned and did something that stopped her heart. He smiled. A small, tentative quirk of his lips, but undeniably a smile. "Oh, Tommy," she whispered. Before he could respond, Lightning's head jerked toward the window, her body tensing. A car was approaching. Martha peered outside, relieved to see Dr. Peterson's familiar vehicle. "It's just the doctor," she assured them both. "He's come to check on Lightning." The examination confirmed Dr. Peterson's suspicion. Using a portable ultrasound machine, he showed them the tiny forms nestled inside Lightning's belly. At least 4 puppies, possibly more. "Remarkable," he murmured, moving the wand carefully over Lightning's abdomen. "After everything she's been through, these little ones are still hanging on." Tommy watched the grainy images on the screen with wonder, his hand never leaving Lightning's head. The dog remained calm throughout the examination, her trust in Tommy extending to the veterinarian by association. "She'll need extra nutrition," Dr. Peterson explained, packing away his equipment. "I'll bring some special food for pregnant dogs later today, and we'll need to create a whelping box where she can deliver safely when the time comes." After he left, Tommy sat beside Lightning, his hand resting gently on her belly as if he could feel the tiny lives growing within. His expression held a mixture of awe and determination, a silent promise to protect not just Lightning, but her unborn puppies as well. Martha watched them from the doorway, a lump in her throat. The image before her symbolized everything they had gained in the past 2 days. Hope, purpose, a reason to look forward rather than back. Yet, she couldn't shake the shadow of worry that hung over them. Rankin had promised to return with court papers. The legal documents he'd shown yesterday seemed legitimate. What if the law sided with him? What would happen to Lightning then? To her puppies? To Tommy? The thought of losing Lightning now, just as Tommy was beginning to emerge from his shell, was unbearable. Martha resolved to do whatever it took to keep them together. This unlikely family forged by river water and shared pain. As if sensing her thoughts, Lightning looked up, her intelligent eyes meeting Martha's. In that moment, Martha felt she understood the dog completely. Lightning had fought too hard to survive, had found too precious a connection with Tommy to ever go back to the cruelty she had escaped. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Tell us in the comments, what do you think happened to Lightning before she ended up in the river? Do you believe she somehow knew Tommy needed her? The days that followed took on a gentle rhythm. Each morning, Tommy would wake early to check on Lightning, his small hands carefully examining her injuries, making sure her bandages were clean and dry. Martha watched as he developed his own system of care. Water first, then food mixed with medication, followed by gentle exercise in the backyard. Lightning grew stronger daily. The deep cuts on her legs began to heal, The swelling around her paw subsided, and her coat regained some of its shine. Most telling was her eyes. No longer haunted by fear, they now held a calm alertness, especially when watching Tommy. Dr. Peterson visited every other day, marveling at Lightning's recovery. "She's healing faster than I expected," he commented during one checkup. "Being in a loving environment makes all the difference." As Lightning's physical wounds healed, so too did Tommy's emotional ones. He still didn't speak much, just the occasional word whispered to Lightning when he thought no one was listening. But his body language had transformed. He stood straighter. His movements were more confident. He made eye contact now, something he had avoided since his father's death. Martha created a calendar to track the days until Lightning's puppies would arrive. According to Dr. Peterson's estimate, they had about 3 weeks to prepare. Tommy threw himself into the preparations with unexpected enthusiasm, helping Martha convert an old wooden crate into a whelping box, lining it with soft blankets and placing it in a quiet corner of the living room. "We should get supplies," Martha suggested one morning over breakfast. "Puppy formula, extra towels, a heating pad. Dr. Peterson said we need to be ready for anything." Tommy nodded, his eyes lighting up at the prospect of an outing, the first he had shown interest in since the accident. "We can't leave Lightning alone, though," Martha continued, watching as the German Shepherd settled at Tommy's feet, her now visible pregnant belly resting on the cool kitchen tiles. "Rankin is still out there, and I don't trust him." Tommy's face clouded at the mention of Rankin. His hand instinctively went to Lightning's head, a protective gesture that had become second nature. "Sheriff Davis hasn't found anything yet," Martha sighed. Despite several visits to Rankin's property, the sheriff had discovered no concrete evidence of animal abuse. "But he's keeping an eye on the situation." A knock at the door startled them. Lightning was on her feet instantly, not growling but alert, positioning herself between Tommy and the potential threat. Martha peered through the window, relieved to see Sheriff Davis on the porch. "It's all right," she told Tommy as she opened the door. The sheriff removed his hat as he stepped inside. "Morning, Mrs. Wilson. Tommy." He nodded to the boy, then bent to offer his hand to Lightning, who sniffed it cautiously before allowing a brief pat. "She's looking better." "She's healing well," Martha agreed. "Dr. Peterson says the puppies are developing normally, too." Sheriff Davis's eyebrows rose. "Puppies? Well, that's some news." He settled into a chair at Martha's invitation. "Actually, that's partly why I'm here. There's been a development with Rankin." Martha tensed. "Has he filed for custody of Lightning?" "Not exactly. He's left town." "Left town?" Martha repeated, confusion and relief washing over her simultaneously. Sheriff Davis nodded. "Packed up and disappeared 3 days ago. Landlord says he paid his final month's rent in cash and said something about heading west." "Just like that? After he was so insistent about Lightning being his?" The sheriff's expression turned grim. "That's the thing. After he left, I had cause to search his property more thoroughly. What I found—" He glanced at Tommy, hesitating. Martha understood immediately. "Tommy, why don't you take Lightning outside for a little while? I need to talk to Sheriff Davis." To her surprise, Tommy didn't argue. He patted his leg, and Lightning followed him out the back door, her pregnant belly swaying slightly as she walked. Once they were alone, Sheriff Davis leaned forward, his voice low. "I found evidence of serious animal abuse, Martha. Blood stains on the floor of his shed, barbed wire with fur caught in it, German Shepherd fur, and worse." Martha's hand went to her throat. "What did he do to her?" "It wasn't just her. There were remains, other dogs, I think, buried in shallow graves behind the property." He shook his head, disgust evident in his expression. "This wasn't a man who wanted a pet. This was someone who enjoyed causing pain." Martha felt sick. "Do you think he's gone for good?" "Hard to say. He knows we're onto him now. I've put out an alert to neighboring counties, but—" He spread his hands. "People like Rankin, they're good at disappearing when they need to." "What about Lightning? Legally, I mean." "Given the evidence and the fact that Rankin has abandoned the property and any claim to her, I'd say you're in the clear. Dr. Peterson's documentation of abuse will stand up in court if it ever comes to that." Relief flooded through Martha. "Thank you, Sheriff, for everything." After he left, Martha sat at the kitchen table, trying to process what she had learned. The scope of cruelty Lightning had endured was worse than she had imagined. that the dog could still trust, still love, after such treatment seemed nothing short of miraculous. She walked to the back door, watching as Tommy and Lightning played a gentle game of fetch in the yard. Tommy would toss a small rubber ball a short distance, careful not to make Lightning run too hard in her condition. The dog would retrieve it with dignified patience, bringing it back and placing it precisely in Tommy's waiting hand. Their movements were synchronized, attuned to each other in a way that transcended words. They had saved each other, Martha realized. Tommy had pulled Lightning from the river, but Lightning had pulled Tommy from a different kind of drowning, the silent, suffocating grief that had consumed him after losing his father. That afternoon, they made the trip into town for puppy supplies. Lightning sat in the back seat of Martha's old station wagon, her head held high as she watched the landscape pass. Tommy sat beside her, one hand resting reassuringly on her side. The small pet store on Main Street rarely saw much business, so the owner, Mrs. Jenkins, was delighted to help them gather everything they needed for the impending birth. Whelping pads, puppy formula, extra towels, she listed, leading them through the aisles. A digital thermometer is essential. You'll need to monitor Mama Dog's temperature. When it drops below 100 degrees, delivery is usually within 24 hours. Tommy listened with intense concentration, nodding at each instruction as if committing it to memory. He selected a soft toy for each potential puppy, counting them out carefully and placing them in their cart. Mrs. Jenkins smiled at his dedication. "You're going to be a wonderful puppy midwife," she told him. Then to Martha, "It's good to see him out and about. We've all been worried." Word of Lightning's rescue and Tommy's emerging from his shell had spread through the small community. Several people stopped them on the street, offering kind words and encouragement. Lightning received many gentle pats, accepting the attention with dignified grace. By the time they returned home, laden with supplies, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard. Tommy helped Martha carry everything inside, then immediately set about organizing it all beside the whelping box. His methodical approach reminded Martha so much of his father that her heart ached with both sadness and pride. Lightning settled in her new birthing space, sniffing the blankets and testing the walls of the box with her paws. She seemed to approve, circling 3 times before lying down with a contented sigh. That night, Martha found Tommy sitting beside the whelping box, a book about dog care open on his lap. Lightning dozed beside him, her head resting on his knee. "Time for bed, sunshine," Martha said softly. Tommy looked up, his expression serious. He pointed to the book, then to Lightning's swollen belly. Martha understood. "You're worried about the birth?" A nod. She sat beside him, placing an arm around his thin shoulders. "It's natural to be concerned, but Lightning is strong, and Dr. Peterson will help us. We'll get through it together." Tommy hesitated, then leaned against her, accepting the comfort. It was the first time he had initiated physical contact with anyone but Lightning since the accident. Martha held him close, savoring the moment. "Your dad would be so proud of you," she whispered. To her surprise, Tommy didn't stiffen at the mention of his father, as he usually did. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the creased photograph, the one of him and his father fishing. He looked at it for a long moment, then carefully placed it on the edge of the whelping box, as if his father's image could watch over Lightning too. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Dr. Peterson brought a book about canine midwifery, showing Tommy how to recognize the signs of labor and what to do in various scenarios. "The most important thing is to stay calm," he emphasized. "Lightning will take her cues from you. If you're anxious, she'll be anxious." Tommy nodded solemnly, absorbing every word. Each night he slept on a makeshift bed beside the whelping box, his hand often resting on Lightning's side, feeling the occasional movement of the puppies within. Martha began to take Lightning's temperature twice daily, recording it in a notebook. Tommy insisted on helping, holding Lightning still while Martha carefully inserted the thermometer. The dog submitted to these indignities with remarkable patience, seeming to understand their purpose. 1 week later, in the early hours of a Sunday morning, Martha woke to the sound of Tommy's footsteps running down the hallway. She threw on her robe and hurried to the living room, where Tommy was kneeling beside the whelping box, his eyes wide with excitement and fear. Lightning was panting heavily, her sides heaving. She looked up as Martha entered, her eyes seeking reassurance. "Is it time?" Martha asked, kneeling beside Tommy. He nodded, showing her the thermometer. 98.6 degrees. I'll call Dr. Peterson, Martha said, reaching for the phone. You stay with her. Remember what the doctor taught you? Keep her calm. Make sure she knows she's safe. The veterinarian arrived 30 minutes later, bringing additional supplies. By then, Lightning's contractions had begun in earnest. She whimpered softly with each wave of pain, her eyes fixed on Tommy as if drawing strength from his presence. First-time mothers can take a while, Dr. Peterson warned them as he examined Lightning. We could be in for a long day. But Lightning, as she had done since the moment they pulled her from the river, defied expectations. Just an hour later, her first puppy arrived, a tiny wet bundle that Dr. Peterson quickly cleaned and handed to Tommy. Rub it gently with the towel, he instructed. Help it breathe. Tommy's hands trembled as he took the tiny life, his movements careful but confident. He worked the soft towel over the puppy's body until a small, high-pitched squeak emerged. Good job, Dr. Peterson praised. It's a boy. Place him near Lightning's head so she can check him over. Lightning sniffed her firstborn carefully, then licked his tiny face. The puppy squirmed, already seeking his mother's warmth. 3 more puppies followed over the next 2 hours, 2 females and another male. Each time Tommy helped clean and stimulate the newborn, then presented it to Lightning for inspection. The German Shepherd accepted each one, licking them clean before guiding them to nurse. Dr. Peterson checked each puppy thoroughly. They're all healthy, he announced with some amazement. Given what Lightning went through, it's remarkable. 4 perfect puppies. Tommy beamed with pride, his eyes never leaving the new family. Lightning looked exhausted but content, her 4 puppies nestled against her belly, nursing hungrily. You did it, girl, Martha whispered, stroking Lightning's head. You're a mama now. As Dr. Peterson packed up his supplies, he pulled Martha aside. I've never seen anything quite like this. The way she trusted the boy, how calm she stayed through the whole process. He shook his head in wonder. That dog knew exactly what she was doing, picking Tommy that day in the river. Some kind of animal instinct, maybe. She found the person who could save her and her babies. Martha watched as Tommy leaned over the whelping box, gently stroking each puppy's tiny head with a single finger. Lightning watched him with utter trust, allowing him to handle her precious offspring without concern. I think you're right, Martha agreed. It wasn't just coincidence. After Dr. Peterson left, Martha made hot chocolate and brought it to Tommy, who still sat vigilant beside the whelping box. Lightning had fallen into an exhausted sleep, her puppies nursing contentedly. You should get some rest too, Martha suggested. It's been a long night. Tommy shook his head, unwilling to leave his post. He sipped the hot chocolate, his eyes never leaving the sleeping family before him. Martha settled beside him, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. I am so proud of you, Tommy, she whispered. You helped bring these little ones into the world. You gave Lightning a safe place to have her babies. Tommy looked up at his grandmother, and then something extraordinary happened. In a voice scratchy from disuse but clear and deliberate, he said, We saved each other. Martha's eyes filled with tears. 4 words, the longest sentence he had spoken since the accident. Yes, she managed to say past the lump in her throat. Yes, you did. Tommy returned his gaze to Lightning and her puppies. She needed me, he said softly, and I needed her. Martha pulled him close, her heart overflowing. The wall of silence had broken at last. Like the river that had brought them together, Tommy's words began to flow, halting at first, then with growing confidence. Dad would like them, he whispered, looking at the puppies. He always wanted a dog. He would love them, Martha agreed, her voice thick with emotion. And he would be so proud of you, Tommy. So very proud. Tommy reached out to stroke Lightning's head. The dog opened her eyes briefly, acknowledging his touch with a gentle thump of her tail before drifting back to sleep, secure in the knowledge that her family was safe. We're a family now, Tommy said, the words coming easier with practice. Lightning and the puppies and us. Yes, Martha agreed, her heart full. We are. Over the next 2 days, Tommy rarely left the whelping box. He helped Martha change the bedding, made sure Lightning had constant access to water and food, and monitored each puppy's progress with scientific precision, recording their weights in a small notebook. The puppies grew stronger by the hour, their tiny bodies plumping up with Lightning's milk. Tommy gave each one a name, Max, the firstborn male with a white patch on his chest, Luna, the largest female with Lightning's coloring, Shadow, the smallest male with dark fur, and Hope, the last-born female who had arrived with her eyes already trying to open. Lightning proved to be an attentive mother, cleaning her puppies regularly and responding immediately to their smallest cries. But what amazed Martha most was how fully she accepted Tommy as co-parent. When he reached into the whelping box to check on a puppy, Lightning watched with absolute trust. When he helped rearrange the squirming bodies so all could nurse, she waited patiently. Word spread quickly through the small community about the miracle puppies born to the rescued dog. Dr. Peterson shared the story with his other clients, emphasizing the remarkable bond between Tommy and Lightning. Neighbors began to stop by with small gifts, handmade toys for the puppies, treats for Lightning, cookies for Tommy. Sheriff Davis visited a week after the birth, bearing news that Rankin had been apprehended in a town 50 miles west. "He won't be bothering you again," he assured Martha. "With the evidence we found at his property, he's facing serious charges." The sheriff knelt beside the whelping box, marveling at the puppies. "Well, I'll be. Look at these little miracles." He glanced at Tommy with newfound respect. "You did a good thing, son. You saved 5 lives the day you reached into that river." Tommy, who now spoke freely to those he trusted, replied simply, "They saved me too." Sheriff Davis nodded, understanding the deeper truth in the boy's words. As he prepared to leave, he paused. "You planning to keep all the puppies?" Martha hadn't considered this question yet. The puppies would eventually need homes, but the thought of separating them from Lightning and from Tommy was painful. "We haven't decided," she answered honestly. That night, after Tommy had finally been persuaded to sleep in his own bed, Martha sat beside the whelping box, watching Lightning nurse her puppies. The German Shepherd looked up, her intelligent eyes meeting Martha's. "You knew, didn't you?" Martha whispered. "Somehow, you knew Tommy needed you as much as you needed him." Lightning blinked slowly, her expression almost wise in the soft lamplight. One of the puppies, little Hope, detached from nursing and crawled up toward her mother's head, squeaking determinedly. Lightning gently nudged her back to the warmth of her siblings. Martha reached in to help, her fingers brushing against the photograph of Tommy and his father that still stood at the edge of the whelping box. In that moment, she felt a certainty that went beyond logic. These puppies had been meant to be born here, in this house, under Tommy's watchful care. Their birth had completed something that began the day Lightning appeared in the river, a circle of healing that had brought Tommy back from the edge of his own dark waters. Sometimes, Martha thought, the deepest wounds can only be healed by those who have known similar pain. Lightning had recognized in Tommy a fellow survivor, and in saving each other, they had created something beautiful. Not just new life, but new hope. Could it be just an accident that a drowning dog found a drowning boy, and together they learned to breathe again? Or was there something more at work? Some deeper current of connection that brought them together at exactly the right moment? Do you believe animals can sense emotional pain? Have you ever been saved by